Good morning. My name is Anishay and I am from Exclusive Magnesium Private Limited. Thank you for attending today's call and taking the time out. Um, as you might know, today we'll be doing a basic introduction to subcontracting non-ferrous castings from India. I'm sure some of you are already sourcing non-ferrous products from China or from even the Indian region, and that's perfectly fine. Over the course of this presentation, we'll tell you a few things that you might be able to do better to improve um, your vendor quality and the quality of your product. If you haven't already sourced any product from India, then this is the ideal presentation and will give you all the basics that you need to know about. Just a little bit about us. We are a 25-year-old company, and we've been doing non-ferrous castings, extrusions, forgings, and machine parts for the past 25 years for all sectors. And on this call, the team we have available for you itself has a cumulative experience of almost 100 years in non-ferrous product production. So ask as many questions, and we hope we could help you. A few key things to keep in mind during the course of this webinar. Make sure that all your questions are being asked in the chat box. Stay muted at all times. We'll take all the questions at the end unless there's something that is complementary to the slide that is on, and I'll answer it immediately for you. Try and keep your questions as generic as possible, so that it's like useful to everybody on the call. And if you have any industry specific questions, that's perfectly fine. We could take that at the end after the generic questions, or if we've not been able to cover that, we'll answer those. We'll reach out to you after this call and answer those for you on email or even on call. I'm sure there'll be some form of technical issues over the course of this call, so I request you to be patient and log out and log in again, and I'm sure most of them will be solved. Try and keep your video off so that it drastically improves the quality of the audio that you're getting. Some of the things that we'll be talking about today is trends in subcontracting. So the past 2 years, two years that we've seen with post COVID and slightly before COVID, the kind of trends that we've been observing in subcontracting. We'll also talk about all the non-ferrous castings we are referring to in this presentation. We'll talk about the pros and cons of India that everybody should know about. There are regional differences within India since it's a huge country. So we'll talk about the relevant ones over this call. The gist of the presentation would be the 8 key questions that you should be asking suppliers, and we'll get to that around the middle, and we'll close it by telling you a little bit about the cultural sensitivities while working with Indians and how do you get started. So that's the complete agenda for today. Okay, let's talk about the key subcontracting insights that we've observed over the past couple of years since COVID, and that these have only intensified with time. Number one, India is doing great when it comes to engineering exports revenue. It's reached its all-time high last year in the year 2021-22, and personally also we've observed a lot more international companies approaching the Indian vendors and Indian companies for such kind of job work and subcontracting work. So India is definitely being looked at seriously by a lot of international companies. Second, we have also seen a huge amount of American buyers transitioning away from China to India due to the high tariffs that their products are being subjected to, and also the high tensions. The tensions also is causing a lot of the defense hardware companies to transition out of China because of the tensions, and in everything ranging from mechanical hardware, avionics, drones, raw materials, electronic components, everything. They would want that supply chain to be secure even at difficult times. Diversification is a new thing where companies are not just developing this like say a non-ferrous vendor in in one country, but in multiple Asian countries. It could be India, Vietnam, South Korea, you name it. They're looking everywhere to develop these options. And the companies which can afford it are doing a lot of onshoring as a priority. So they are bringing back critical aspects to their supply chain back into their country, so that they are in control of the supply chain. And even in something like COVID, if it were to happen again, they are not jeopardized in terms of the supply. Okay. So there are tons of non-ferrous alloys. So the two that we thought we should talk about today are one, which is something, one is aluminium, which is India's strength, and there's a very strong ecosystem of aluminium in India. So that's one thing that we'll talk about. And the second is magnesium. Magnesium is a relatively new metal in India, and but it has a booming sector growing in the Indian ecosystem. So that's something worth looking at. Yeah, but the principles behind what I'm talking about is relevant for all non-ferrous alloys, so you can apply the same to everything else. Quickly, I'll tell you a little bit about magnesium if you're not aware. Magnesium is the lightest structural metal. It is used in performance critical lightweight parts and is used as a replacement for aluminium, steel, plastics and titanium by a lot of mechanical engineers. It has excellent EMI EMC properties and damping properties, and is good thermal conductivity. 90% of magnesium is actually extracted in China, and the remaining is distributed all across the world from Israel, Russia, Australia, UK, so all over there. But 90% comes from China. But at any given point of time, a lot of raw material is available everywhere, because magnesium is a critical component for nuclear and also for ferrous production. So you'll find it abundantly available everywhere in India for that reason. The most commercially used alloy in throughout the world is probably AZ91, which is useful for most use cases, but there's a lot of combinations, and every combination of alloy for magnesium is available for production in the Indian ecosystem. The second, aluminium. I'm sure all of you also have a very good experience with aluminium. India has a very robust aluminium ecosystem with expertise in all commercial alloys. So all your casting alloys ranging from LM0 to LM30, and also wrought alloys from 6061, 6063, 7075 are the most common. These parts are usually used for enclosures, structures and thermal use cases, and even lightweighting of converting steel components into a lightweight alternative. And it is abundantly extracted in India, so this is not a challenge at all. Okay, a few pros about India. So India and its vendors, you would see, have a very comprehensive range of metal forming capabilities. So that is never going to be a challenge when it comes to Indian vendors. You'll always find a vendor, even if it's a very specialized process, you will find someone, a very good vendor for that in India. The second reason why you should be looking at India is because India works with low MOQs. So no matter what your MOQs are, there are vendors would be happy to work with you because export is a priority. India is obviously an English speaking country. All business in India is done through English, so you'd never have the language barrier that you would with other countries. There's no trade and trade tariffs or tensions with most other countries, so I'm sure UK also has. We just had the Prime Minister of UK come to India for a trade agreement, so the relationships between countries are also excellent. Most of Indian vendors are family run businesses, MSMEs, micro, small and medium enterprises, and most of them are export focused. Um, One thing that gives India the advantage is that India has lower labor cost in comparison to even China, and therefore any process that requires, which is labor intensive, would become, India would make it, would be a significantly better option than most other countries to do that process in India. IP protection is taken seriously. The courts over here take it seriously. The companies over here take it seriously, which is obviously, if you've worked with China, you would understand the kind of IP protections, laws, and loopholes that exist there. Um, Most Indian vendors, if they are at a certain export quality vendor, would definitely engage in R&D work, because they are always looking at long-term business. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So you could do a new process development itself in the country, and you'd find a lot of acceptance for that. And obviously, it's a trade-friendly government. Even during COVID spikes, we had all manufacturing functioning in the country, and so that's just an example of how trade friendly the government currently is and has always been when it comes to exports. A few cons: you should expect longer lead times in comparison to China, and that's one. So Indian manufacturers will take more time. They'll deliver early if required, but they will definitely take more time to get things right. Second, most logistics providers and manufacturers are not always educated on packaging needs and restrictions for packaging country wise. So there's a lot of education you might have to do there. And the third, which doesn't really make too much of a difference, is the road infrastructure in India is not as good as China. So you would expect a week longer for transport, half a week or a week longer for the transportation of your goods from the city of manufacturing till your port, if it's not like a dry port. So that's one more thing to keep in mind. So your lead times have to be according to that. All right. So regions do matter in India. India has different specialization hubs, like in which is common even in other countries. So you do specialized work in separate regions. So we looked at all the data from export import of non-ferrous product across the country, and we observed that zinc is the focus of zinc in India, and the majority of the exports happen from the western side of India, from Mumbai. Magnesium is completely south. I would say 95% of magnesium comes from the south of India. And aluminium is, like I mentioned, it's a huge ecosystem. So, but the three regions you should keep in mind are east, north, and south. These are the three regions that contribute the most in terms of exports. So that doesn't mean that you can't go to the other regions. It just means that you would find vendors which are specialized in very critical work with these alloys, and are working with high quality, and they're getting a lot more work as well. So they would always be able to deliver your product faster and will give you a higher quality. All right. So distance from the port is critical. So there are several different seaports and airports, dry ports and seaports essentially. The four major ones that you would know is Mumbai, Chennai, Visakhapatnam, and Kolkata are the four major seaports that where your product is going to be dispatched from. And the airports that you would expect your dispatch to happen from are Hyderabad, Bangalore, Delhi, Mumbai, the major metropolitans of India. A lot of people do their supply from those dry ports as well. Yeah. Languages vary, but that shouldn't matter, because your communication with these companies would be in English. Okay, now we'll start off on the 8 key questions you should be asking suppliers before you start working in the Indian region. The first question I would always encourage people to ask is, what is your core expertise? When you're working in the non-ferrous metal forming space, the company and the manufacturer might be good at a certain process, like say gravity casting, extrusion specifically. But over a period of time, they would have developed vendors and a supply chain for machine parts, forgings, whatever that might be, because on the demands that they've been receiving from their customers. It's always important to ask what their core expertise is. For example, for us, it's gravity castings and pressure die casting. That's our expertise. We do offer a lot of others to customers because we've developed a supply chain for it, but our core expertise have always been gravity castings and pressure die castings. So it's always good to know what you'd get the best work out of this manufacturer for, and select them for that process specifically. Second, what is your maximum available capacity? So every process that your manufacturer tells you that there is their core expertise would also have a maximum available capacity. Maybe they are completely booked, they have very little capacity left for the year, or maybe they have a whole shift that can be filled in. So it's important to know how much available melting capacity they have and how much more of product can they accommodate in their facility without being stretched. The second is, say even if a manufacturer tells you that sand castings, permanent mold and die castings, which is our core competence, is our core expertise, but you should also ask what size and what quantity of castings can these companies take up. For example, our sweet spot has always been that companies which are needing anywhere between 1 to 1200 units for sand casting. That's something that per company we can manage that. Permanent mold, anywhere between 500 to 35,000 is the sweet spot, and the maximum is 35,000 units per company we want to accommodate. And for die casting, it's 1200 units, 120,000 units. So this is what we would like to be accommodate. So it's also important the size of the casting. So for example, in sand casting, we've done the biggest size of 2.5 tons in a single casting for aluminium, but we would be more than there are companies out there, if you ask them to do a 500 kilo casting in aluminium, they would struggle. So try and find out what is the right factory size for your product, and understand that well, and then start working with them. What are your quality compliance standards? Question number 3. So this is one of the most critical aspects in understanding about your vendor, is that what is the compliance to the standards they are able to achieve. So I'm sure your product has a certain level of standards required for melting, mechanical properties during casting, or different elements at raw material stage. So you need to convey those and explain those to the manufacturer, and they can tell you whether they can meet that or not, and if they have any experience with meeting those or not. A few indicators of that would be the quality certifications that they have. If they have internationally recognized certifications like ISO, AS9000, these are good indicators that they would be someone that can accommodate these kind of requests. A lot of Indian manufacturers also have nationally recognized certifications. One good example that we have is we are DGAQ approved, which is a Directorate General of Aeronautical Grade Assurance, Quality Assurance. So that's a local standard for Indian defense, Indian aerospace quality. So it's good to know all certifications so that you can make your decision in terms of whether judgment as to whether they'll be able to meet all your quality requirements, and that's important. You have to discuss your inspection matrix up front. if you are requiring some form of certifications at different stages, or if you're requiring certain specialized testing, if you require any processes to be witnessed by your people, all of this has to be discussed upfront, and so that the manufacturer can account for those costs and can um, tell you whether they can manage those things or not. And an important element is, do they have third party uh, testing facilities, or do they do their testing in house, and what does your product require? Question 4: what process is in house and what is outsourced? In most cases, the core competence of the organization would be in house, and a lot of secondary processes could also be in house depending on the kind of manufacturer you're working with. But most MSMEs depend on some of the secondary processes to be done outside their facility. They would have vendors that they're working with for maybe coating, tapping, machining, whatever it might be. It's important that you know that. And also, what are the selection standards for these vendors that your manufacturer is maintaining, and whether those vendors are under an NDA as well or not during yeah. So this is something that would impact your product's quality directly. So it's important that you are clear about what is being done by the manufacturer, what is being outsourced, and um, make a decision based on that. It's standard procedure to ask for all in-house machinery list, so you're not confused that why was this process given out. You should ask those things upfront in terms of a machinery list, and also like I mentioned about testing. Question 5: what is your experience with exports? Amongst all of them, I think this is one of the most important elements that you should focus on. If a vendor has not done any kind of exports previously, they would struggle immensely with export documentation, with packaging, and a lot of other elements, and which will only delay the product delivery on your end. A lot of companies have IEC code registrations but have never used it, so keep that in mind. Only work with export focused vendors. Check an easy way of doing a check is just go online, check for EXIM data, export import data platforms that exist. So you can go online, check their the export import history of any customer, and you'd get a good sense of what kind of HS codes they have experience exporting, what quantities have they handled, and that would be indicative of what you should expect eventually. Schedules and lead times. So like I mentioned previously, India has longer lead times, so probably talk about these things with your manufacturer, obviously, and understand what kind of tooling time they require, what kind of time they require for transport of your material from their city of manufacturing to the port. Yeah, and which port exactly will it be dispatched from? These are important, and I would encourage that to avoid any form of over promising on over promising of delivery timelines. I would encourage you to have a penalty clause in place. Either this penalty clause will help will give a penalty in terms of reduction in price, or a penalty for the price, or maybe in terms of payment cycle, whatever that might be. But that has to be discussed upfront, and while working with such vendors, always work with that. And in my experience, also a lot of UK based companies look for payment after delivery of material, which not a lot of Indian companies are willing to do, but the ones which are export focused are more than happy to do that. So that's also another very good indicator. what beyond price can we negotiate on? So negotiations in India happen can be done in a lot of ways. You can negotiate on lead time, payment terms, MOQs, free of cost samples, etc. Two other elements that you should keep in mind is that if it is valuable to have warranty and clear value for your product to have warranty, then a lot of companies are willing to do anywhere between 3 months to 1 year of warranty for the product that they're delivering to you. So for non-ferrous castings, so ask for that if it's relevant. Second is what is the timeline of the project. If it's a 15-year service period for that component, I would recommend that you do anywhere between 8 to 10 years of quality records retention, and get a little bit into the what kind of quality retention records are they retaining for other customers. Yeah, so those are the 8 questions that would be key to selecting a good vendor within India. The last couple of topics that I would be covering is cultural sensitivities. So India uh, is a very diverse country with a lot of cultural differences. They say that every 100 kilometers the language or the dialect changes in India. So when you do come to India, I would recommend in these times of COVID, you can always do like a video call and do a complete tour of the facility. But if you do come to India, you would get to meet the family, right? Most of them are family run businesses, so you'll meet all the key members of the family and what responsibilities they're dealing with, um, along with the extended team, obviously. Uh, Relationships in India definitely trump business, mostly. And the kind of terms that you get with a manufacturer, I would go ahead and tell you that it is defined by the quality of the relationship you have with this team. So the more they trust you, the more favorable terms you have, and so your focus is always supposed to be on mutually beneficial engagement and trust. You should understand that the manufacturer is also there to earn uh, a buck or so from your work, and don't try and squeeze them for every penny, because they would not be as favorable in terms of lead times or something else. So I would say that focus on mutual beneficial engagements and trust building should be a focus over a long period of time. This will definitely pay off. You would have a lot of holidays and religious holidays and offs in India due to the just the sheer number of religions and the sheer number of cultures that are involved, and a lot more days off would observe, but you can talk about the timelines and how that will be affected, and I'm sure they will also bring it up when the timeline is being discussed. So yeah, those are the few things to keep in mind, nothing too serious. Last, how do you start sourcing? So the best way obviously is to do trade shows and conferences. You can always come here, go to subcontracting conferences that happen almost every month in India. So you can come over and you can look at the big ones, like if you're an industry specific one, you can look at Aero Expo, Def Expo, different ones like those. You can also use Google. The ones who are on Google are probably the ones that are export focused also, so you can keep that in mind. There are a few supplier platforms on this. So Trade India and IndiaMart are two good supplier platforms that you can look at. They do have a lot of traders and not actual manufacturers posing as manufacturers, so you have to keep that in mind. um, there are agents. You can get an agent to work for us. If you're looking for an agent who can connect you to such a sourcing agent, we can connect you to a few of them if you need on request. Or you can just send us an inquiry. I think everything that we spoke about is something that we can do and is our expertise in non-ferrous. So we can help you with that. I'd like to use the next couple of minutes just to tell you a little more about our organization, just to see whether we could be a good fit for your organization or not. Exclusive Magnesium is India's first private sector magnesium parts manufacturer. We are approved for defense critical castings, aerospace critical castings, and even automotive castings, but we are sector agnostic. We've been doing this for the past 25 years and work with materials like magnesium alloys, aluminium alloys, and metal matrix. We work with over 100 brands recognized internationally, everything from Seat, Mercedes-Benz, Ducati, Volvo, ISRO, DRDO, a huge range of customer clientele that we can share with you. We are certified for AS 9100, which is an aerospace standard, and other quality certifications like ISO 9001, 14001, and 45001, which is for quality processes, worker safety, and environmental safety. We as an organization are trying to use the power of material science to help innovators build energy efficient machines using lightweight materials. That's our focus and that's our mission. This is the long range of processes that we are able to make available for you through us. Like I mentioned earlier, high pressure die casting and gravity castings are our main expertise, but we are able to be the single point for all your non-ferrous requirements if you need. In early stage, we are able to offer sand castings, low volume extrusions, machining, and 3D printing. For production stage, we can do high pressure die casting, extrusion, and permanent mold castings. We have a very resourceful design team in-house which can deal with redesigning your components for new materials. So if you have a steel design and you want to make it in magnesium, we can help you with that. If you need to optimize that design for weight or performance, we can help you do that as well. If you have specifications in place, we can custom design for you, or any kind of FEA analysis or analysis that you might require for your product or for engineering requirements, we can deal with that. Here are our details. I mentioned our addresses, our website, and our email IDs on this slide. You can go through it, and if you have any questions, you can write to us and we'll respond back as quickly as we can.